When you consider just how quiet Nintendo has been about Tears of the Kingdom, and also think about the history of Nintendo releasing new systems with a major Zelda game, or at least that major Zelda game marking the end of a generation, and then also these leaks for a Tears of the Kingdom OLED, yet still no announcement, and the release date for Tears of the Kingdom draws ever closer. But then when you also consider that there are these rumors and mumblings and even some potential leaks for a Nintendo Switch 2 that could even be coming sooner than a lot of us have been expecting, this whole situation, this relationship between Tears of the Kingdom and Nintendo Switch 2 seems to be quite odd. So in this video, what we're attempting to do is having a bit of a discussion while we try and figure out how this is all related, piecing together this relationship between Tears of the Kingdom and the rumored Nintendo Switch 2. That's the focus today.
Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart. I'm recording here in a hotel room in Boston. I've been enjoying PAX East, it's been an awesome time. But because we are away from our typical set, the editing in this video will be a little different, a little bit more simplified, so please bear with me, I do appreciate it. And I will point out we still are campaigning to reach 25,000 subscribers by the time Tears of the Kingdom comes out on May 12th. So if you enjoy my content, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because maybe we might just make it. But let's now dive into this discussion. What is going on here? I think there's a lot of different factors. First, let's outline a little bit of the history of how Nintendo has handled their major Zelda games alongside some hardware releases. And it isn't the case to say that literally every single time there is a major new Zelda game, they have hardware on the same day, but it is a common strategy for them. I think back to when the Nintendo 3DS came out and they didn't have a major new Mario or Zelda game to push the system. It wasn't doing so well at first, but then they had the price drop, they had the Ambassador program, they came out with Ocarina of Time 3D, and things started to turn around. But then you also look at Nintendo's previous most successful home console of all time, the Nintendo Wii. They launched that system with Twilight Princess, and that became the best-selling Zelda game for the time, and it helped, alongside Wii Sports, to push the system, have an incredible launch, and be an incredibly successful system. You consider Skyward Sword, that came out very late into the Wii cycle, and perhaps it was a mistake to have it come out so late into the cycle with the Wii U already announced and looming later on. They even put out this really cool tech demo for the Wii U that was like a Twilight Princess on steroids situation. It looked amazing. And perhaps for some people, it kind of made Skyward Sword look not so good. But regardless, Skyward Sword did mark the end of the Wii generation. It was that last big Nintendo game, even though there's a bit of a drought leading up to its release. And then you look at the more recent years with Nintendo Switch. They launched the Nintendo Switch with Breath of the Wild. They made sure to do it right this time. Instead of having Skyward Sword coming out at the end with a long drought, they kicked things off with one of the best games ever made, and the Switch is now an even more successful system than the Nintendo Wii, by a significant margin I would say, because not only have hardware sales been impressive, but software has been magnificent. Now that's not just because of Breath of the Wild, but it definitely helped to kickstart their momentum. But it's not just some new major Zelda releases, but we've seen Nintendo use some smaller Zelda releases as well to push revisions. For example, we had Majora's Mask 3D launch alongside the new Nintendo 3DS. We also saw Link's Awakening Remake launch alongside the Nintendo Switch Lite. Nintendo has demonstrated that they have a favoritism towards Zelda when it comes to releasing new hardware, and this likely has to do with the fact that it does contribute to some great success. So then when you consider Tears of the Kingdom and how this has been the longest gap between major Zeldas ever, and it doesn't look like they're releasing Tears of the Kingdom alongside a new system, it's a little bit of a head scratcher. Now, my personal take is that the timing just didn't work out. I don't think they have to release a new Zelda every time there's new hardware. History shows that there are occasions when they haven't, although more recently they've shown to be more successful when they do. But if they have something else that's about as exciting, about as impressive, I think that will have a similar effect. So I've been speculating that when we do get that next Nintendo system, be it at the end of this year, as some rumors may suggest, or sometime the year after, I think it would probably be launched with a 3D Mario, and maybe some other exciting games could be coming out around that time as well. So when I consider this point alone, I'm not saying, man, it's so strange that Nintendo decided to put out Tears of the Kingdom before the release for their next system when it's so close. But when I think about the other factors, it gets strange, because Tears of the Kingdom is coming out May 12th. Why May 12th? It just feels like a strange time to do it. It's a little bit of a head scratcher, I would say. We've seen Nintendo build up a little bit of this habit to have some type of major release to come out in March, to close out their fiscal year. Their fiscal years end at the end of March of every year, and by putting out a big major release in the month of March, it allows them to bring in a little bit more numbers to boost their overall picture when it comes to their fiscal earnings. Yet this year, they gave us Bayonetta Origins, and that may sound like I'm slighting the game. I do not intend to do that. It's a quality game. If you've been thinking about it, I recommend you check it out. It looks pretty cool. Point being though, Bayonetta Origins is not going to sell 10, 20, 30 million copies. That's not the kind of game. This is a niche series. This is a spin-off of a series that may only sell a couple million in Bayonetta 3. So it's definitely not like a Tears of the Kingdom or an Animal Crossing or a Monster Hunter Rise kind of release as Nintendo has done in some of the previous years during the Switch era. So what's so significant about May? Honestly, it's hard to say. But something that else is really strange here is that June is right after May, obviously, but perhaps not so obviously is Nintendo's plan for June. Usually we have a major summer direct and E3 direct in June, yet Nintendo has announced that they do not intend to be at E3 this year. Why? They simply told us that it just doesn't fit with their plans this particular year. They still share their support for the ESA, but there's just something about their plan for this year that leads to them not participating. And you might think, okay, well, there have been different insiders that have come out and said that Nintendo just doesn't have a big lineup after Tears of the Kingdom. Perhaps the second half of this year is just going to be a massive drought with occasional games here and there, because this is the end of the Switch life cycle, and sometime next year we may see the Switch 2. That is something that a lot of people have been believing, but something that perhaps a lot of people haven't been picking up on, I've noticed that this story didn't catch as much energy or buzz, is that one of those insiders has actually taken back their words a little bit, or perhaps rephrased the situation, and that's Andy Robinson. Andy Robinson was one of the people that initially suggested some things that led to people believing that Nintendo wasn't going to have a strong second half. But Andy Robinson has said that it seems more like that their releases for this year are simply coming out a little bit later into the year, implying, I would say, that, yeah, the summertime may not have too many major releases, so that's kind of maybe why they don't have a big summer showcase. But we don't know what they're going to do. And we also don't know what's to come out in the second half, which is also a very strange situation. The only game that has a confirmed release date for the second half of 2023 is Pikmin 4. And now we're at the end of March. We're running out of time. At some point or another, they have to start announcing games for the second half of the year. Now you may argue, well, they're just not going to have a lot of games, but I find it hard to believe that Nintendo is going to let up on their momentum. They've had consistent releases throughout the entire Switch life cycle. We've seen plenty of evidence that they have been sitting on a whole bunch of games, so I don't think it's a situation where they don't have games to come out. I think they do, and they will be coming out, and they will be maintaining momentum. Even if they do have a next generation system, they're not just going to abandon the Switch that's still selling pretty strong, has great hardware sales, has great software sales. I think, like Sony, like Microsoft, they're going to have a handful of years. They're going to be a transitional period where they support Switch and the next system side by side. So, point being, I really don't see a scenario where there aren't a lot of major games coming out in the second half of the year. Basically, Nintendo's just being really quiet. And at some point we're going to get those news. But it also reminds me of the situation with Tears of the Kingdom where they've also just been really quiet about it. Here we are, less than 7 weeks away from the release of the game, and we don't know how the game starts technically. We technically haven't had the underground confirmed. It seems pretty obvious, but it's still not confirmed. We don't know how the UI works. We don't know if there are Korok seeds technically. We don't know how the weather system works or how the weapon system works or anything. There are so many questions for people who may be on the fence on this game. At some point, they do need to be answered. Now, I think things are going to be fine. I know there's been this debate. I think once Nintendo decides to give us the information, people will get it and it will work out fine. There's going to be great word of mouth for this game. I do think it's going to sell pretty well. Will it beat Breath of the Wild? The jury's still out on that one. But they will give us the information. The odd part, though, is just how long they are waiting to give us this information. They've been so quiet. And what makes this extra peculiar, as we mentioned in the exposition for this video, there was a leak for a OLED edition for Tears of the Kingdom. And as I said earlier, we are less than 7 weeks away from the release of this game. And not having announced it yet is definitely out of the ordinary. So consider that Nintendo has had what seems to be a bit of a strategy to use OLED editions to push some of their major releases that are set to be selling 10 plus million. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which has already eclipsed 20 million, they had an OLED edition. Splatoon 3, which also has already eclipsed 10 million, they had an OLED edition. And those systems were announced 10 and 9 weeks respectively away from the release of their particular games. Yet here we are, less than 7 weeks away from the release for Tears of the Kingdom, and we don't know what's going on. Now, there's a rumor that maybe there could be an update coming out in a few days this week. Will that happen? We shall see. Take it with a grain of salt. Who knows what this information might be? It might be nothing. It might be just, hey, you can get that Tears of the Kingdom pin that was at PAX through your Nintendo account. We don't know. But every week, there's a possibility Nintendo's going to give us some news because there's still so much to learn about this game. But, you know, considering how long we are waiting for this OLED to get announced, maybe this OLED, while I do believe it was based on something real because it was leaked months before we even saw some of the promotional material for Tears of the Kingdom, and that promotional material does match up with the art for this OLED, that doesn't mean it's going to come out to market. Maybe it was an idea they considered that's being canned, or maybe they're simply just waiting longer than usual for whatever reason to announce it. But I'm going to say this. I do think that if the OLED is not coming out, if for whatever reason we get the Tears of the Kingdom Nintendo Direct maybe early April, maybe even next week, we don't know, but if we get some sort of deluge of information for Tears of the Kingdom with no OLED announced, I'm going to start to think that they had this OLED in mind, but then canceled it behind the scenes because they realized maybe it's not the best course of action because we have a Nintendo Switch 2 around the corner. So what I'm saying is, if OLED is not confirmed for Tears of the Kingdom, like that special edition, then I think Nintendo Switch 2 is coming out this year as some rumors have suggested. Which brings me to another interesting point I want to bring up here. There was this leak regarding the Pokemon DLC that talked about how there's going to be a graphics enhancement patch coming out for the second wave for the next generation Switch, winter of 2023, which puts us in a window of sometime between December 2023 and March of 2024. The DLC is likely coming out around that period of time, and there's likely going to be a graphic enhancement patch coming out for the next system for Pokemon sometime in this window. That's what the leak suggests. So if this is the case, that would imply that a new system may be coming out by that time or before that time. And what's exciting about this, not only suggesting that maybe a Nintendo Switch 2 could be coming out this holiday, is that even if it is coming out later, there may be graphics enhancement patches for a lot of major games, including Tears of the Kingdom. And what's interesting here is that when we consider this history of big Zelda games being used to push hardware, Tears of the Kingdom, even though the marketing has been kind of quiet up to this point, they may be planning a big second wind for Tears of the Kingdom. They may have a big graphic enhancement patch for Tears of the Kingdom, maybe by the end of this year or early next year, and that may also launch alongside some DLC. Nintendo may actually want Tears of the Kingdom to pass Breath of the Wild in sales. So if they give Tears of the Kingdom this big push throughout this year as the premier game to play, but then they give it another wind as a big title to play alongside the Nintendo Switch 2 with a graphics enhancement patch and some really exciting DLC that's made clear is made after the fact as additional content, could be pretty exciting. I personally would be all aboard. But we don't know what they're gonna do, and it's just a strange situation. My personal take is this, and keep in mind, as evidence presents itself, my opinion may change, but I think that Nintendo's silence on Tears of the Kingdom isn't necessarily directly related to the next system. I think they're being quiet because they already know that Breath of the Wild is out there, people have a decent idea of what it is, and they recognize that the silence actually kind of contributes to the hype. And this is a unique situation that doesn't work for every game, but for a game like the sequel to Breath of the Wild, it does. So they've given us enough to fuel the fire of that speculation that's exaggerated by this silence that is frustrating some fans. But they still will give us that blowout that will satisfy those that are on the fence and put out the information that's needed for the casuals that go beyond the hardcore, so everything will be all well and good once it's all said and done. And similar to Breath of the Wild, they may be figuring that the word of mouth is going to help to push this system, but they are also thinking down the road that there will be a second wind. And perhaps the timing of Tears of the Kingdom coming out May 12th is purposeful. They may have released Tears of the Kingdom during this time because what they're really thinking about right now is maintaining momentum and keeping themselves in the conversation. Imagine had they had Tears of the Kingdom come out last holiday or this March. Maybe there would have been too long of a gap of quality huge games that really stir up the conversation before the next system comes out. Maybe Nintendo wanted to avoid that. When we think about when Skyward Sword came out back on the Wii, it was a great game that came out at the end of the Wii's generation, but you could argue that it came out way too late. The momentum was gone. Skyward Sword greatly underperformed compared to Twilight Princess. Had Skyward Sword maybe have come out a year or so sooner, that might have been a little different. So what I'm getting at here is I think that Skyward Sword's timing of release just wasn't great for the momentum that the Wii had at the time. Meanwhile here with Tears of the Kingdom, it's coming out at a point that's a few months after the release for a major open world Pokemon game, which definitely pushed sales there, and it's keeping the conversation going, keeping Nintendo relevant. And then once Tears of the Kingdom comes out, they'll be that much closer to when their next big system is ready, when their next big Nintendo games are ready, be it a 3D Mario, there's rumored Donkey Kong, Metroid Prime 4, who knows. So it's more about maintaining that momentum. And when it comes to the OLED, if it's not announced, yeah, I think Switch 2 is coming out this holiday. If it is announced, Switch 2 may still happen this holiday, but it's a little bit less likely, and the OLED will do pretty darn well, and Nintendo simply has been holding back on it because it fits with their plan to be quiet with Tears of the Kingdom until they absolutely need to give us the information before it comes to market. So basically Tears of the Kingdom is the swan song for Switch in a way, but not entirely because there will still be games coming to Switch, but it will function as that bridge of hype and excitement leading us to the next generation, and that it will get a second wind to help push the next system as well alongside other major releases. That's what I think is the actual true relationship between Tears of the Kingdom and Nintendo Switch 2. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.